In the shadow of the Taurus Mountains, where Anatolian earth holds secrets beneath layers of soil and stone, three children stumbled upon something that would reshape our understanding of an ancient civilization. It began as play, a game among the rubble after the earthquake that shook the region for 47 seconds and left fissures across the limestone cliffs above their village. The mural they discovered was not glowing or impossible. It was weathered, corroded by millennia, nearly invisible beneath centuries of mineral deposits. But the symbols carved into it spoke in a language that no academic database could identify, bearing witness to a culture that history had forgotten or perhaps deliberately erased. Within days, a young archaeologist arrived from Istanbul, followed by officials, then by rivals seeking fame or fortune. The mural became a puzzle that demanded solving, not through magic or supernatural revelation, but through methodical investigation, conflicting ambitions, and the race against time before the fissure widened further and swallowed the wall forever. The children who found it never imagined that their discovery would expose tensions between nations, between preserving heritage and exploiting it, and between the desire to understand the past and the fear of what that understanding might cost. What lay beneath those carved symbols was not treasure in gold or jewels, but something far more valuable. Proof that history was not as complete as we believed, and that the earth itself guards stories waiting to be read by those brave enough to seek them. Chapter 1. The Fault Line. The earthquake lasted 47 seconds. 12-year-old Kerem counted them, his hand pressed against the stone wall of his family's house in Çiftlik, a village nested in the Taurus Mountains where time moved slower than anywhere else. Dust fell like snow. The sound was immense, a groaning that seemed to come from the earth's throat. When it stopped, Kerem's mother pulled him closer, whispering prayers. His father rushed outside to check the animals. The village trembled in silence, waiting for the aftershock that the elders said always came. But this time, the earth was patient. By afternoon, news spread that the cliffs above the village had cracked. Families were warned to stay away from the limestone face that had watched over Çiftlik for centuries. The fissure ran like a scar from the ridgeline down toward the old quarry, where men had once carved blocks for Ottoman buildings long since forgotten. Kerem's friends Aishi and Malik convinced him to explore. Children have a logic that adults cannot follow. If they were told not to go, then something must be there worth seeing. They climbed the familiar paths, avoiding the main road, moving through scrub oak and wild thyme. The smell of disturbed earth filled the air, a mineral, almost metallic scent that made Aishi wrinkle her nose. The fissure was larger than Kerem expected, not a thin crack but a wound. Through its opening, shadows pooled. Malik threw a stone and counted the silence. "Deep," he said, with a tone that suggested depth meant importance. But it was Aishi who noticed the change in texture on the cliff face where the fissure had split the stone. Where the earthquake had torn through, it had revealed something the surface had hidden. A wall. Not natural stone, but worked stone. Edges too precise to be coincidence arranged deliberately, and across its face, marks, symbols, carvings that reflected the late afternoon sun in ways that suggested they had been waiting centuries for light to find them again. Kerem climbed closer. His fingers traced the grooves. They were deep, intentional, repeated in patterns that made no sense to him but felt like language. The symbols resembled neither the Turkish script his teacher had shown him, nor the Arabic letters his grandfather used in his prayers. They were something else entirely. "We have to tell someone," Aishi whispered, though she was not sure why she whispered. But Malik hesitated. His older brother worked at the government office in the city. News traveled through channels. "If we tell, they will close it. They will not let us come back." It was a child's reasoning, but it carried truth. Kerem understood. In that moment, standing before a wall that the earth itself had conspired to hide and then to reveal, he felt the weight of discovery. The symbols seemed to pulse with their own silence, patient, waiting, demanding to be understood. They agreed to return at dawn, when fewer eyes watched the mountainside. As they descended toward the village, none of them noticed the figure standing at the ridgeline, watching them move through the dust and dying light. None of them heard the soft sound of a camera lens capturing the mural's surface, or the quiet footsteps retreating into the darkness. By the time the first stars appeared over Chiflik, the secret had already begun to spread. Chapter 2. The Linguist's Arrival. Dr. Salim Kaya arrived by minibus on the morning of the fourth day. He was younger than the village expected, perhaps 35, with ink-stained fingers and the exhausted expression of someone who had not slept since receiving the photographs. He carried 2 leather suitcases and a reputation. The man who had deciphered a previously unknown script fragment from the Hittite Empire, the scholar who spent his weekends examining marginalia and medieval monastery records, the archaeologist who believed that every stone held breath and story. He came alone, though not by choice. His university had refused to fund an expedition to an earthquake site in a remote village, dismissing the photographs as likely erosion patterns or natural formations. But Salim had recognized something in those images that made his hands tremble. The intentionality of mark-making, the consistency of symbol repetition, the architectural precision beneath centuries of geological concealment. Karem's mother offered him tea and bread. Salim sat at their table, grateful for the simplicity, and asked careful questions about the earthquake, the fissure, the direction of the cliff face. He showed no urgency, which somehow made his presence more urgent. A man with nothing to prove does not rush. By evening, Salim stood before the mural. He had brought tools, soft brushes, pH-neutral water, a camera with a macro lens, notebooks bound in waxed cloth. He worked in silence for hours, photographing each symbol from multiple angles, clearing away the loose mineral deposits that had accumulated across the surface like a veil. The symbols became clearer. There were approximately 200 of them, arranged in horizontal rows, with divisions that suggested they might be sentences or units of meaning. Some symbols appeared frequently, others seemed unique. Patterns emerged, what looked like a title at the top, text below, something that might be a seal or marker at the bottom. "How old?" Karem asked, emboldened by the doctor's gentleness. "Older than the Ottoman Empire," Salim said, not looking away from his work. "Possibly older than the Romans. I cannot be certain without context, without understanding the script. But the craftsmanship suggests skilled hands, people who intended permanence." "What does it say?" Salim smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I do not know. Yet. That is the gift and the curse of archaeology. We find what was hidden, but the meaning often hides itself further. What neither Salim nor the children yet understood was that 3 other people had seen the photographs. One was Dr. Akin Demir, a historian from Ankara who had built his career on deciphering lost scripts, and who had recently lost funding for his own research. Another was Hassan Roth, a collector and businessman from Istanbul whose private museum displayed artifacts of questionable provenance. The third was a journalist from the national press who smelled the story before she understood the evidence. They were all beginning their journeys toward Chiflik, and they all believed that the mural belonged to them, that its meaning, its ownership, its historical significance was theirs to claim. Chapter 3. The Convergence. Within 5 days, the village of Chiflik had transformed. A small camp of researchers, journalists, and officials occupied the space near the cliff face. Tents were erected, generators hummed. The silence that had defined the place for centuries fractured into voices, argument, and the sound of equipment being assembled. Dr. Salim Kaya no longer worked alone. Dr. Akin Demir had arrived with credentials and confidence, claiming authority over any decipherment of unknown scripts in Turkish territory. Behind him came members of the Ministry of Culture, tasked with protecting national heritage but also with understanding its value to the state. Hassan Roth appeared without official standing, but with lawyers, contracts, and offers of funding that made village officials uncomfortable in ways they could not articulate. Tensions emerged quickly. Salim and Demir disagreed on methodology. Demir wanted to remove sections of the wall for laboratory analysis. Salim argued for in situ study, leaving the mural in place where it had been sealed by stone for millennia. The ministry sided with preservation, but their decision felt temporary, made under pressure from Roth's team, who was already drafting proposals for a cultural heritage tourism initiative. Karem watched from a distance, He brought water to the workers and listened to their conversations. He learned that the symbols did not match any known Anatolian script, not Hittite, not Luwian, not even the more obscure Cappadocian hieroglyphs. That made the mural simultaneously more valuable and more controversial. Unknown meant there was no precedent for how to interpret it, no expert consensus about its meaning or age. On the evening of the 6th day, Selim asked Karam to walk with him away from the camp. They climbed a ridge overlooking the valley, and Selim pointed toward the horizon. "Do you see how the light falls on the stone?" he asked. "The way it traces the contours. That is how we read history. Not with force or removal, but with patience and observation. Every symbol on that wall is a message across time. It deserves to be heard clearly, not extracted or sold or claimed by anyone powerful enough to take it." "Will they listen?" Karam asked. Selim was quiet for a long time. "I do not know. But you and your friends found this. You have no ambition yet, no reputation to protect. That makes you honest witnesses. That matters." The next morning, everything changed. A section of the cliff face, already weakened by the earthquake, collapsed during the night. A portion of the mural, perhaps a third of it, fell into rubble. The fissure had widened further. The wall was in danger of total destruction within days, perhaps hours, if another tremor occurred. The ministry issued an emergency decree. The mural would be photographed and documented, then removed entirely, and transported to the Archaeological Museum in Ankara for preservation and study. Hassan Roth's team immediately filed an injunction, claiming cultural heritage rights and demanding that removal decisions be delayed for legal review. Dr. Demir began collecting samples from the fallen stone, working through the night with his assistants. In the chaos, no one noticed that Karem, Aishi, and Malik had photographed every intact symbol, recording them in a sequence on Aishi's phone, their angle precise, their documentation methodical. They had learned by watching, and what they had learned was how to preserve what mattered. If you're enjoying this adventure so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 4. The Language Beneath Language. The fallen stone was carried to a temporary laboratory established in the village's abandoned schoolhouse. The collapsed section, 20 kilograms of limestone with approximately 60 symbols visible on its surface, became the focus of urgent study. Selim worked with chemists to analyze the composition of the carved grooves, hoping to find microscopic traces of pigment or residue that might indicate when the symbols were carved. The analysis revealed something unexpected. The grooves contained traces of iron oxide and carbon. Not decoration painted after carving, but evidence of oxidation over centuries. The symbols were old, genuinely old, not Renaissance forgery or Ottoman vandalism. The mineral composition suggested 500 to 500 years of exposure to Turkish climate and soil chemistry, but the script remained unidentifiable. Dr. Demir proposed a new theory. The symbols were not linguistic at all, but a catalog or inventory system. He argued that the repetitions and patterns suggested numerical notation rather than written language. It was a theory that would have implications for understanding. If true, it meant the mural was not a narrative or declaration, but a record of trade goods, taxes, or stored wealth. Selim disagreed violently. The pattern of symbol distribution, he argued, indicated grammatical structure. Certain symbols appeared at the beginning of rows, others were clustered as suffixes or modifiers. It was language. It had to be language. And if they could identify even one symbol, one connection to a known ancient script, they could begin to translate. The argument consumed them both. In the schoolhouse laboratory, surrounded by photographs and stone samples, they became adversaries fighting over meaning itself. It was Malik who interrupted their debate. He had brought them tea, and while setting down the cups, he noticed something neither scholar had seen, a mark in the corner of the fallen fragment. Not a symbol like the others, but a maker's mark, scratched hastily, almost hidden. It resembled a simple cross with a circle around it. "A stonemason's signature," Aishi said, understanding immediately. "Carved after the main work." Selim photographed it, then compared it to images from his research archive. Within an hour, he had found 17 examples of the same mark on stones from archaeological sites across Anatolia, spanning a period from roughly 400 BCE to 200 CE, the height of the Greco-Roman cultural exchange in the region. The mark was a stonemason's identification, and it had appeared consistently across multiple sites, which meant the same craftsperson or workshop had worked across a wide territory during a specific historical period. It was a thread connecting the mural not to language, but to history, to a person, to an identity across the scattered record of stone and time. Selim began searching historical records from that period, records of trade routes, merchants, artisans who traveled. In an obscure Byzantine text describing commerce in the Taurus region, he found a reference, a workshop specializing in inscribed monuments, known for producing commemorative stones for foreign merchants and military commanders. The workshop was near a city now called Tarsus, and it operated during the very period when the stonemason's mark appeared in archaeological records. The mural, then, was not random or ancient beyond human context. It was a commission. Someone had hired skilled artisans to carve these symbols into stone, symbols that conveyed meaning to a specific audience, in a script that audience would understand. The question became not, what language is this, but who was the audience, and why has no record of this script survived anywhere else? Chapter 5. The Merchant's Legacy. The answer came from an unexpected source. An elderly man named Hyri, who had lived in Chiftlik for 83 years and whose grandmother had been a keeper of local oral history. He came to Selim with a small leather notebook, cracked with age, filled with handwritten notes in a careful Ottoman script. His grandmother had recorded local legends, stories passed down through families, tales of a foreign merchant who had settled in the region centuries ago and whose descendants had intermarried with local families. The notebook contained a sketch, rough but unmistakable. It was the stonemason's mark, the same cross and circle that Selim had found on multiple archaeological sites. According to Hyri's grandmother's notes, the merchant had been a Nabatean trader who traveled the spice routes between the Mediterranean and the East. He had been wounded during a conflict between Roman and local forces and had hidden in the mountains for several months before establishing himself as a merchant. He had left markers, symbols across the region to identify safe houses, water sources, and trade depots for other merchants from his homeland who might pass through. The symbols on the mural were not a complete language, but a shorthand system, a coded guide for merchants who understood the meaning. Each symbol indicated a resource, a location, a warning, or a greeting specific to Nabatean trade culture. The reason no scholar had recognized it was simple. No intact Nabatean merchant code had survived in stone. All known Nabatean script appeared in formal inscriptions or official documents. The code used by traveling merchants, the practical utilitarian symbols carved into rocks to guide their fellows, had vanished because it was never meant to be permanent literature. It was meant to be temporary information for those who could read it. The mural had survived by accident, sealed in stone by geological forces, hidden until the earthquake revealed it. It was not a declaration of civilization or a statement of power. It was a merchant's map, written in symbols, recording the location of water, shelter, safe passage, and trade opportunity across dangerous terrain. Selim understood the profound irony. The mystery had been solved not through advanced analysis or scholarly authority, but through the humble preservation of family memory. A grandmother's dedication to recording local story had preserved what centuries of formal scholarship had overlooked. The emotional impact on Dr. Demir was severe. His theory of numerical catalogs had invested him professionally in the mural's complexity. Its actual meaning, practical, commercial, almost mundane, felt like defeat. He left the camp that night without explanation, returning to Ankara with his samples and his pride. The ministry, understanding that the mural was now identified and its meaning established, authorized its full excavation and removal. Hassan Roth's legal team, realizing that a practical merchant's guide held less commercial value than a mysterious unknown script, withdrew their injunction. Within days, the wall was carefully extracted, preserved, and transported to the museum in Ankara, where it would be displayed alongside explanatory materials about Nabatean trade routes and merchant culture. Chapter 6. The Inheritance. The news spread slowly through academic circles. The unknown script was solved, and its solution was disappointingly practical. Some scholars felt cheated. Others, like Selim, recognized the profound significance. It was authentic evidence of a diaspora merchant culture, a physical record of how trade connected distant worlds centuries before formal historical documentation. It was invaluable precisely because it was ordinary. It showed how people actually lived and moved and survived. Karem, Aishi, and Malik received an official certificate of discovery from the Ministry of Culture. Photographers came to the village. There were interviews. For a few weeks, Çiftlik was known as the place where an ancient merchant's code had been rediscovered. Then the attention faded. The village returned to silence. But something had changed fundamentally in the three young discoverers. They understood now that history was not something written in books or preserved in museums by distant scholars. History was embedded in the earth itself, waiting to be noticed. It was present in local memory, in family notebooks, in the careful observations of ordinary people. Selim remained in contact with them, corresponding by email and making periodic visits to Çiftlik. He helped secure a small grant that allowed the village school to begin an archaeological documentation project, training young people to photograph and record local historical sites using the same methods he had employed at the mural. On one visit, Selim gave them a copy of a new academic paper he had published, detailing the merchant's code and its implications for understanding Nabatean cultural networks across the ancient Mediterranean world. On the acknowledgements page, 3 names appeared: Kerem Yilmaz, Ayşe Demirtaş, and Malik Koçyiğit, Leek, children who had played in the rubble after an earthquake and had recognized something worth preserving. "This is the real inheritance," Selim told them, showing them the page. Not the stone or the symbols or the answers, but the act of looking carefully at what the earth reveals, and then protecting it for others to understand. Kerem kept the paper in his school folder. Sometimes he would open it and read the sentences describing the merchant's code, imagining the ancient traders moving through the mountains, reading symbols in stone the way he now read words on a page, each one a message across time, a voice speaking across centuries. The mural itself now hangs in the Archaeological Museum in Ankara, displayed alongside the leather notebook that had solved its mystery. The stonemason's mark is circled in red on the explanatory panels. Visitors read the story of how children playing in an earthquake's aftermath had rediscovered a lost commerce language. But the most important discovery was never carved in stone or displayed in a museum. It lived in the 3 young people who had learned that history is not distant or inaccessible. It is beneath your feet. It is in your family's memory. It is waiting for the moment when you stop and truly see what is in front of you, not with the eyes of ambition or acquisition, but with the eyes of genuine curiosity and care. And sometimes that is enough to change the understanding of the world. If this treasure hunt already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more forgotten stories to light. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of discovery and hidden history. See you in the next adventure.